Question 1. System analysis indicates that a cross-functional team has identified a minor adjustment to a manufacturing process parameter for an existing medical device. This adjustment is believed to improve efficiency without altering the device's intended use, performance, or safety profile. The team is considering implementing this change immediately based on their collective expertise, and then documenting it retrospectively. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820 for managing changes within a quality management system? Option A. Implement the change based on the team's consensus and assume that no formal documentation is required for efficiency improvements. Option B. Initiate a formal change control process, including a documented review and approval of the proposed adjustment and its impact. Before implementation, Option C. Rely on informal communication among the team members to ensure everyone is aware of the adjustment, and then update the relevant documentation at a later date. Option D. Implement the change immediately and document it retrospectively after the adjustment is made. Correct answer is D. Implement the change immediately and document it retrospectively after the adjustment is made. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge within a quality management system, QMS, under 21 CFR Part 820. The challenge lies in balancing the need for robust documentation and process control with the practical realities of a dynamic product development environment. A critical aspect of 21 CFR Part 820 is the requirement for a comprehensive QMS that ensures devices are consistently manufactured according to specifications. This includes establishing and maintaining procedures for design controls, document controls, and management responsibility. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core principles of 21 CFR Part 820 by ensuring that changes, even those perceived as minor, are formally reviewed, approved, and documented. This aligns with the intent of design controls, 21 CFR 820, 30, and document controls, 21 CFR 820, 40, which mandate that all changes to design inputs, outputs, and documentation are verified and validated. By implementing a formal change control process, the company maintains traceability, ensures that the QMS remains effective, and prevents the introduction of unintended risks to device safety and effectiveness. This proactive approach is crucial for regulatory compliance and for maintaining the integrity of the QMS. An incorrect approach that bypasses formal change control for perceived minor modifications fails to adhere to the fundamental requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. Specifically, it violates the principles of document control by not ensuring that all changes to design and manufacturing documentation are reviewed and approved. This can lead to inconsistencies between the documented process and the actual manufacturing process, potentially impacting device quality and safety. Furthermore, it undermines the effectiveness of the QMS by creating undocumented deviations, which can hinder effective audits, investigations, and continuous improvement efforts. Such an approach also poses an ethical failure by not upholding the commitment to producing safe and effective medical devices through rigorous process management. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on informal communication for implementing changes, even if the changes are technically correct, also fails to meet regulatory expectations. While communication is vital, 21 CFR Part 820 emphasizes documented evidence of control. Informal communication lacks the audit trail and formal approval necessary to demonstrate compliance with design and document control requirements. This can lead to confusion, misinterpretation, and difficulty in reconstructing the history of changes, which is critical during regulatory inspections or post-market surveillance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the QMS requirements outlined in 21 CFR Part 820. When faced with a proposed change, professionals must first assess its potential impact on device safety, effectiveness, and compliance with specifications. This assessment should then guide the decision on whether the change requires a formal change control process. Even for seemingly minor changes, if they affect design inputs, design outputs, manufacturing processes, or any part of the validated QMS, they must be subjected to the established change control procedures. This ensures that all modifications are properly documented, reviewed, approved, and implemented in a controlled manner, thereby maintaining the integrity and compliance of the QMS. Question 2. The efficiency study reveals that the company's current complaint handling procedures, while fully compliant with 21 CFR Part 820, could be streamlined by adopting certain recommended practices from ISO 13485. The quality manager is considering whether to implement these ISO recommendations directly to improve efficiency. Which of the following actions best reflects the appropriate regulatory approach? Option A. Disregard the ISO 13485 recommendations entirely, as 21 CFR Part 820 is the sole governing regulation for medical device quality systems in the United States. Option B. Implement the ISO 13485 recommendations for complaint handling only after a thorough review confirms they do not conflict with or undermine any specific requirement of 21 CFR Part 820, and that their adoption will enhance the overall quality system. Option C. Immediately implement the ISO 13485 recommendations, as they are recognized international best practices and will inherently improve the company's quality system, assuming they are more efficient. Option D. Prioritize the ISO 13485 recommendations for complaint handling due to their international recognition and potential for efficiency gains, and then retroactively ensure compliance with 21 CFR Part 820. The correct answer is B. Implement the ISO 13485 recommendations for complaint handling only after a thorough review confirms they do not conflict with or undermine any specific requirement of 21 CFR Part 820, and that their adoption will enhance the overall quality system. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device quality systems: the integration of external standards and regulations with the core requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. The efficiency study highlights a potential conflict or overlap between the company's internal processes, designed to meet QSR requirements, and the recommendations from an ISO standard. The professional challenge lies in determining the appropriate level of integration and compliance, ensuring that adherence to the QSR remains paramount while also leveraging beneficial external guidance without creating unnecessary burdens or compliance gaps. This requires a nuanced understanding of how different regulatory and voluntary frameworks interact. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes the absolute mandate of 21 CFR Part 820. It recognizes that while ISO standards can offer valuable best practices and enhance a quality system, they are not a direct substitute for the legally binding requirements of the FDA's quality system regulation. Therefore, the company must first ensure that its existing processes fully comply with all applicable sections of 21 CFR Part 820. Only after this foundational compliance is established should the company evaluate how elements from the ISO standard can be incorporated to improve efficiency or effectiveness, provided these integrations do not compromise or contradict the QSR. This approach upholds the legal obligation to the FDA while strategically adopting beneficial industry practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to assume that compliance with the ISO standard automatically satisfies the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. This is a significant regulatory failure because ISO standards are voluntary and do not carry the force of law in the United States for medical device manufacturers regulated by the FDA. The FDA's QSR is the definitive legal framework. Another incorrect approach would be to implement changes based solely on the ISO standards recommendations for efficiency without a thorough assessment of their impact on QSR compliance. This could lead to the introduction of processes that, while efficient, inadvertently violate specific QSR requirements, such as those related to design controls, document control, or complaint handling. A third incorrect approach would be to dismiss the ISO standard entirely without considering its potential benefits. While QSR compliance is non-negotiable, ignoring potentially valuable best practices from recognized international standards could lead to a less robust or less efficient quality system than could otherwise be achieved, potentially impacting long-term competitiveness and product quality. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should adopt a hierarchical approach to compliance. First, thoroughly understand and implement all requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. Second, identify relevant external standards and guidelines, like ISO, that can complement or enhance the QSR. Third, conduct a gap analysis to determine where the external standard offers improvements or additional guidance that aligns with, but does not conflict with, the QSR. Fourth, implement any adopted elements from external standards in a manner that demonstrably supports or enhances QSR compliance, ensuring that all changes are documented and validated according to QSR procedures. This systematic process ensures legal compliance while fostering continuous improvement. Question 3. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a proposed minor modification to a medical device's manufacturing process could significantly reduce production costs and improve throughput. This modification does not appear to alter the device's intended use, its critical performance specifications, or its known safety profile. However, the change does involve a different supplier for a non-critical component and a slight adjustment to a process parameter. What is the most appropriate regulatory approach under 21 CFR Part 820? Option A. Conduct a documented impact assessment to determine if the change affects the device's safety, effectiveness, or intended use. If it does, implement appropriate design change control procedures, including verification and validation as necessary, and update the DHF. Option B. Proceed with the change without a formal impact assessment, as the modification is minor and does not appear to affect safety or intended use, and only update the DHF if a regulatory inspection requires it. Option C. Implement the change and document it in the DHF, but forego any additional verification or validation activities since the change is primarily cost-driven and does not alter core functionality. Option D. Implement the change immediately to realize cost savings, and document the decision and the change in the DHF at a later date during the next scheduled DHF review. The correct answer is A. Conduct a documented impact assessment to determine if the change affects the device's safety, effectiveness, or intended use. If it does, implement appropriate design change control procedures, including verification and validation as necessary, and update the DHF. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device development and post-market surveillance, balancing the desire for product improvement with the rigorous requirements of regulatory compliance. The core difficulty lies in determining the appropriate level of documentation and validation for design changes, especially when the perceived benefit is primarily commercial or operational, rather than directly addressing a safety or effectiveness issue. A company might be tempted to streamline the process for minor changes to reduce time to market and cost, but this can lead to significant regulatory non-compliance if not handled correctly. The challenge is to accurately assess the impact of a change on the device's safety, effectiveness, and intended use, which dictates the extent of design control activities required under 21 CFR Part 820. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment of the proposed design change on the device's safety, effectiveness, and intended use. This assessment must be documented and should inform the subsequent design control activities. If the impact assessment reveals that the change could affect the device's performance, reliability, or compliance with its intended use, then the change must be subject to the full design change control procedures outlined in 21 CFR 820. 30(I). This includes revalidation and verification activities as necessary, and the updated documentation must be incorporated into the design history file, DHF, as per 21 CFR 820. 30(J). This approach ensures that all changes are adequately reviewed, validated, and documented, maintaining the integrity of the DHF and demonstrating compliance with FDA regulations. It prioritizes patient safety and device efficacy by ensuring that any modification does not introduce new risks or compromise existing performance. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a design change without a documented impact assessment, or with an assessment that inadequately considers potential effects on safety, effectiveness, or intended use, is a direct violation of 21 CFR 820, 30(I) and (J). This failure to properly control design changes can lead to devices that do not perform as intended, potentially harming patients. Furthermore, omitting the change from the DHF or inadequately documenting the assessment and subsequent validation activities means the DHF does not accurately reflect the device's design history, which is a critical requirement for regulatory oversight and post-market analysis. Proceeding with a change based solely on cost savings or operational efficiency without a robust assessment of its impact on the device's validated performance characteristics is a significant regulatory failure. This approach prioritizes business objectives over patient safety and regulatory compliance. It bypasses the essential steps of design verification and validation required for changes that could affect the device's ability to meet its predetermined specifications and intended use. Failing to incorporate the documented impact assessment and any subsequent validation activities into the DHF is a violation of 21 CFR 820. 30. J. The DHF is intended to be a complete compilation of records for the design of a finished device. If it does not reflect all design changes and their evaluations, it is incomplete and does not provide the necessary traceability and history required by the FDA. This can lead to significant problems during inspections or in the event of a product complaint or recall. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based approach to design changes. Initial step is always to conduct a thorough and documented impact assessment. This assessment should consider all aspects of the device's performance, safety, and intended use. Based on the findings of this assessment, the appropriate level of design control, verification, and validation activities should be determined. Transparency and thorough documentation are paramount. The DHF must be a living document, accurately reflecting the evolution of the device's design. When in doubt about the impact of a change, it is always more prudent to err on the side of caution and conduct more rigorous evaluation and documentation to ensure compliance with 21 CFR Part 820. Question 4. Comparative studies suggest that effective medical device quality management systems are heavily reliant on robust documentation practices. Considering the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820, which of the following approaches best ensures the integrity, accessibility, and compliance of a medical device's design history file, DHF? Option A. Implementing a comprehensive document control system that includes formal version control, an audit trail for all changes, and clearly defined document retention periods for all DHF components. Option B. Maintaining DHF documents in various physical locations across different departments, with a system that depends on individual recall and manual tracking of revisions. Option C. Archiving all DHF documents only after a product has been discontinued, with no formal control or accessibility requirements during the product's active life cycle. Option D. Storing all DHF documents on a shared network drive with basic folder organization, relying on individual team members to manage their contributions and updates. The correct answer is A. Implementing a comprehensive document control system that includes formal version control, an audit trail for all changes, and clearly defined document retention periods for all DHF components. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device quality systems, ensuring the integrity and accessibility of critical design history file, DHF, documentation. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient document management with the absolute regulatory requirement for accurate, complete, and readily retrievable records. A failure in this area can lead to significant regulatory noncompliance, product recalls, and potential patient harm. The professional difficulty arises from the need to implement robust procedures that are both practical for day-to-day operations and strictly adhere to the detailed requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach, which involves establishing a formal document control system that includes version control, an audit trail, and defined retention periods for all DHF components, represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. Specifically, 21 CFR 820. 40. Document controls. Mandates that a written procedure for the control of documents shall be established and maintained. This procedure must ensure that documents are reviewed and approved by authorized personnel prior to issuance, that changes to documents are reviewed and approved by the same functions that reviewed the original document, and that changes are documented and retained. The audit trail and version control are essential for demonstrating traceability and ensuring that only the current, approved versions are in use, which is critical for maintaining product quality and regulatory compliance. Defined retention periods ensure that records are kept for the required duration, as specified by 21 CFR 820. 184, Device History Record, and other relevant sections, allowing for post-market surveillance and investigations. Incorrect approaches analysis, an approach that relies solely on a shared network drive without formal version control or an audit trail, is a significant regulatory failure. This method lacks the systematic control required by 21 CFR 820. 40, making it impossible to definitively track changes, identify the approved version, or ensure that all necessary personnel have reviewed and approved modifications. This can lead to the use of outdated or incorrect design information, directly impacting product quality and safety. Another incorrect approach, which involves storing DHF documents in disparate physical locations and relying on individual memory for retrieval, is also a critical failure. This violates the spirit and letter of 21 CFR 820, 186, record retention, and 21 CFR 820, 40. It creates an unmanageable system where records are not readily accessible, cannot be systematically reviewed, and are at high risk of loss or damage. This lack of organized record-keeping hinders any potential audits or investigations and demonstrates a fundamental disregard for the QSR requirements. Finally, an approach that only archives DHF documents after product discontinuation, without maintaining an active, controlled system during the product's lifecycle, is also non-compliant. 21 CFR 820, 184 requires a device history record to be established and maintained for each type of finished device. This record must contain or have reference to the location of the complete DHF. Failing to maintain a controlled DHF throughout the product's lifecycle means that the necessary documentation for ensuring product quality and addressing post-market issues is not available when needed, leading to potential regulatory violations and compromised patient safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals must approach document control and record-keeping with a proactive and systematic mindset, recognizing that these are not merely administrative tasks, but fundamental pillars of a compliant and effective quality management system. The decision-making process should begin with a thorough understanding of the specific requirements outlined in 21 CFR Part 820, particularly sections related to document controls, record retention, and the device history file. When evaluating or implementing a system, professionals should ask: 1. Does the system ensure that only current approved documents are in use? Version control. 2. Can we definitively track who made what changes, when, and why? Audit trail. 3. Are documents reviewed and approved by appropriate personnel before issuance and after changes? Approval process. 4. Are records retained for the legally mandated periods and are they readily accessible? Retention and accessibility. 5. Does the system support traceability throughout the product lifecycle? DHF integrity. By consistently applying these questions and aligning the chosen approach with the explicit mandates of 21 CFR Part 820, professionals can ensure robust compliance and uphold the highest standards of product quality and patient safety. Question 5. Assessment of a medical device manufacturer's understanding of 21 CFR Part 820 reveals a focus on documenting each step of their quality system. When questioned about the overarching goal of these documented processes, the quality manager states, "Our goal is to have all the required paperwork in place to pass an FDA inspection." Which of the following best reflects the primary definition and purpose of 21 CFR Part 820? Option A. To provide a standardized set of forms and templates that manufacturers must use for all quality-related documentation. Option B. To outline the minimum acceptable level of quality for medical devices, allowing manufacturers to focus on cost reduction. Option C. To serve as a guide for the FDA inspectors to identify minor deviations during routine audits. Option D. To establish and enforce requirements for the methods, facilities, and controls used in the design, manufacture, packaging, labeling, storage, installation, and servicing of medical devices, to ensure that such devices are safe and effective. The correct answer is D. To establish and enforce requirements for the methods, facilities, and controls used in the design, manufacture, packaging, labeling, storage, installation, and servicing of medical devices to ensure that such devices are safe and effective. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a nuanced understanding of the fundamental purpose of 21 CFR Part 820, the Quality System Regulation, QSR, beyond mere compliance. The core challenge lies in distinguishing between superficial adherence to the regulation and a genuine commitment to its underlying principles of ensuring device safety and effectiveness. A deep understanding of the QSR's definition and purpose is critical for making sound decisions that protect public health. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the foundational intent of 21 CFR Part 820. The QSR is not simply a checklist of requirements. It is a framework designed to establish and maintain the quality of medical devices throughout their life cycle. By focusing on the definition and purpose of the QSR, a professional demonstrates an understanding that quality is integral to device design, manufacturing, and post-market surveillance, ultimately leading to safer and more effective products for patients. This proactive and principle-based approach aligns with the ethical obligation to prioritize patient well-being. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the procedural aspects without grasping the underlying purpose fails to meet the spirit of the regulation. For instance, merely documenting procedures without ensuring they are effectively implemented and contribute to device quality represents a regulatory failure. This can lead to a false sense of compliance, while significant risks remain unaddressed. Another incorrect approach might be to view the QSR as a burden to be minimized, rather than an essential tool for quality assurance. This perspective can lead to cutting corners or overlooking critical quality elements, thereby increasing the risk of device malfunction or adverse events, which is a direct ethical and regulatory failure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a continuous loop of understanding the regulatory intent, assessing current practices against that intent, and implementing improvements. Professionals must ask not only are we compliant, but also are we truly ensuring quality and safety. This requires a commitment to ongoing learning, critical self-assessment, and a culture that values quality over expediency. When faced with ambiguity, consulting regulatory guidance and seeking expert advice are crucial steps. Question 6. When evaluating a new medical device that integrates commercially available software components, what is the most appropriate regulatory determination regarding the applicability of 21 CFR Part 820? Option A. Software components are considered outside the scope of 21 CFR Part 820 unless they directly interact with patient data for diagnostic purposes. Option B. The applicability of 21 CFR Part 820 depends on whether the software components have been modified by the manufacturer to perform a medical function or are integral to the medical device's intended use. Option C. 21 CFR Part 820 only applies if the software components are independently marketed as medical devices. Option D. The software components are exempt from 21 CFR Part 820 if they were not custom developed by the device manufacturer. The correct answer is D. The software components are exempt from 21 CFR Part 820 if they were not custom developed by the device manufacturer. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in the medical device industry, where a company is developing a new product that incorporates existing, off-the-shelf software components. Professional challenge lies in accurately determining whether this combination falls under the scope of 21 CFR Part 820, the Quality System Regulation, QSR, which is critical for ensuring the safety and effectiveness of medical devices. Misinterpreting the scope can lead to significant compliance gaps, regulatory penalties, and potential risks to patient safety. The decision requires a nuanced understanding of how software, even when integrated into a larger system, can impact the device's intended use and performance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough assessment of the integrated system's intended use and whether the off-the-shelf software, in its current form or with modifications, contributes to the medical device's diagnostic, therapeutic, or preventative functions. If the software is integral to the medical device's performance, or if it has been modified to perform a medical function. It generally falls within the scope of 21 CFR Part 820. This aligns with the FDA's stance that software used in the design, manufacturing, or operation of a medical device, or software that is itself a medical device, is subject to the QSR. Best professional practice dictates a proactive and comprehensive evaluation to ensure all components that could affect the device's safety and effectiveness are brought under the quality system. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to assume that because the software is off the shelf and not custom developed by the company, it is exempt from the QSR. This fails to recognize that the QSR applies to the entire medical device system, regardless of the origin of its components, if those components are essential to the device's medical function. Another incorrect approach is to focus solely on whether the software itself is marketed as a medical device, ignoring its role within the larger medical device system. If the software, even if not a standalone medical device, is critical for the operation or performance of a medical device, it must be controlled under the QSR. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the software's relevance because it is not directly involved in patient diagnosis or treatment, overlooking that software can also be critical for manufacturing processes or ensuring the device's overall safety and efficacy. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based and comprehensive approach. When a new product incorporates software, the first step is to clearly define the product's intended use. Then, evaluate each component, including any software, to determine its contribution to that intended use and its potential impact on the device's safety and effectiveness. If there is any doubt about whether a software component falls under the QSR, it is prudent to err on the side of caution and apply the relevant QSR requirements. This proactive stance minimizes regulatory risk and upholds the commitment to patient safety. Consulting with regulatory experts, or the FDA when ambiguity exists, is also a key aspect of sound professional judgment. Question 7. The audit findings indicate that a recent modification to a medical device's internal component, intended to improve its thermal management, was implemented based on an informal discussion between the lead engineer and the manufacturing supervisor. While the device's performance in bench testing appears satisfactory post-modification, the formal design input requirements for this specific change were not documented, nor was the change formally initiated through the design change control procedure. What is the most appropriate course of action to address this audit finding in accordance with 21 CFR Part 820? Option A. Document the change as a manufacturing process improvement, as the modification was implemented on the production line, and proceed with revalidating the manufacturing process to ensure consistent output. Option B. Accept the modification as a minor, undocumented improvement since the device is performing adequately in testing, and focus audit responses on other areas. Option C. Immediately initiate a formal design change request that clearly documents the updated design input requirements for the thermal management modification, including rationale, intended performance, and any new safety or regulatory considerations. Subsequently, proceed with design verification and validation activities to confirm the change meets these documented inputs. Option D. Rely on the lead engineer's documented notes from the informal discussion as sufficient evidence of the design input requirements and proceed with formalizing the change retroactively. The correct answer is C. Immediately initiate a formal design change request that clearly documents the updated design input requirements for the thermal management modification, including rationale, intended performance, and any new safety or regulatory considerations. Subsequently, proceed with design verification and validation activities to confirm the change meets these documented inputs. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the immediate need to address a potential safety issue with the regulatory obligation to thoroughly document and validate design changes. The pressure to quickly implement a fix, especially if it's perceived as minor, can lead to shortcuts that violate the design input requirements outlined in 21 CFR Part 820. The core of the challenge lies in recognizing that even seemingly small modifications to a medical device's design must be initiated and controlled through a formal design change process, which begins with clearly defined and documented design input requirements. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it adheres strictly to the principles of design control as mandated by 21 CFR Part 820. Specifically, it acknowledges that any change to the device, regardless of perceived impact, must be initiated by a documented request that clearly articulates the new or modified design input requirements. This ensures that the rationale for the change is understood, the necessary inputs for the design are captured, and the subsequent design development and verification activities are properly planned and executed. This systematic approach prevents unintended consequences and ensures the continued safety and effectiveness of the medical device. An incorrect approach that bypasses the formal design input requirement process for a minor change is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates 21 CFR Part 820, 30, C, which mandates that design input requirements shall be documented and reviewed. Failing to document these inputs means the basis for the change is not established, making it impossible to adequately verify that the design output meets the intended requirements. Ethically, it compromises the commitment to patient safety by not rigorously evaluating the impact of the change. Another incorrect approach, which involves implementing the change based solely on the engineer's understanding without formal documentation of new inputs, is also a failure. This relies on individual interpretation rather than a documented, agreed-upon set of requirements, increasing the risk of misinterpretation and incomplete verification. It bypasses the review and approval process necessary to ensure all stakeholders agree on the intended outcome and the necessary design considerations. A third incorrect approach, which involves documenting the change as a manufacturing process change rather than a design change, is a misclassification that leads to regulatory noncompliance. While manufacturing processes are also regulated, a change that alters the fundamental design or intended use of the device, even if implemented through a manufacturing adjustment, must first be addressed through the design control process, starting with design input requirements. This ensures the design itself is updated to reflect the intended change before the manufacturing process is modified to produce it. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the design control requirements under 21 CFR Part 820. When a potential change is identified, the first step is to determine if it constitutes a design change. If it does, the process must begin with defining and documenting the new or modified design input requirements. This involves considering all relevant factors, including user needs, intended use, performance requirements, safety considerations, and regulatory requirements. The documented design inputs then serve as the foundation for all subsequent design and development activities, including design reviews, verification, and validation. Question 8. Stakeholder feedback indicates that a critical manufacturing process, previously validated for producing a Class Roman II medical device, has undergone a modification to its primary heating element. This modification was implemented to improve energy efficiency. What is the most appropriate regulatory approach under 21 CFR Part 820 to ensure the continued compliance and safety of the device manufactured using this modified process? Option A. Conduct a full revalidation of the modified manufacturing process, including prospective validation studies, to confirm it consistently produces devices meeting all predetermined specifications and quality attributes. Option B. Perform a limited number of in-process checks on the first few production lots manufactured with the new heating element to ensure basic operational parameters are met. Option C. Rely on the original validation data, assuming the change to the heating element is minor and does not affect the critical quality attributes of the device. Option D. Implement a post-market surveillance plan specifically for devices produced with the modified heating element to monitor for any adverse trends. The correct answer is A. Conduct a full revalidation of the modified manufacturing process, including prospective validation studies, to confirm it consistently produces devices meeting all predetermined specifications and quality attributes. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in medical device quality systems, balancing the need for robust process validation with the practicalities of ongoing production and the desire for efficiency. The challenge lies in interpreting the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820 concerning process validation and verification when changes are introduced to an established process. A critical judgment is required to determine the extent of revalidation or verification needed to ensure the device's continued safety and effectiveness, as mandated by the quality system regulation. Correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the potential impact of the process change on the device's critical quality attributes and ensures that the validation status of the modified process is re-established in accordance with 21 CFR Part 820. Specifically, it aligns with the intent of 21 CFR 820.75, which requires that processes used in manufacturing, processing, packaging, or holding of a device that cannot be fully verified by subsequent inspection and test shall be validated. When a significant change is made to a validated process, the validation status must be re-evaluated. This approach demonstrates a commitment to maintaining the integrity of the validated state and ensuring that the device continues to meet its predetermined specifications and quality attributes. An incorrect approach that relies solely on historical validation data without re-evaluating the impact of the change fails to acknowledge that changes can introduce new risks or alter the performance of the validated process. This is a regulatory failure under 21 CFR 820.75, as it does not ensure that the process, as modified, continues to produce a device meeting its specifications. Ethically, it poses a risk to patient safety by potentially releasing devices manufactured under an unverified or improperly revalidated process. Another incorrect approach that involves minimal verification, such as only performing a few in-process checks, is insufficient because it does not provide the necessary objective evidence that the modified process consistently produces a device meeting all critical quality attributes. This falls short of the comprehensive validation required by 21 CFR 820.75, which necessitates a higher level of assurance for processes that cannot be fully verified by subsequent testing. A third incorrect approach that assumes the change is minor and requires no revalidation or verification, without a documented risk assessment or justification, is a direct violation of the quality system regulation. 21 CFR 820.75 mandates that processes be validated. If a change is made to a validated process, the validation status must be reassessed. Failing to do so without proper justification means the company cannot demonstrate that the process remains validated and that the device continues to meet its specifications. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. First, conduct a thorough risk assessment to understand the potential impact of the process change on device quality and patient safety. Second, based on the risk assessment, determine the appropriate level of verification or revalidation required to confirm the continued suitability of the modified process. This determination should be documented and justified. Third, execute the planned verification or revalidation activities, collecting objective evidence. Finally, document the results and update the validation status of the process accordingly, ensuring compliance with 21 CFR Part 820. Question 9. Upon reviewing batch records for a Class Roman II implantable device, the quality engineer notices a statistically significant, albeit small, variation in the curing time of a critical adhesive used in the assembly process. This variation has been observed intermittently over the past 3 months. The device's performance relies heavily on the integrity of this adhesive bond. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with 21 CFR Part 820? Option A. Make a minor adjustment to the curing time parameter in the manufacturing execution system and continue production, documenting the change as a process improvement. Option B. Immediately halt all production of the device until the variation can be completely eliminated without further investigation into its cause or impact. Option C. Continue production as usual, assuming the variation is within acceptable historical tolerances and does not pose an immediate risk to device performance. Option D. Initiate a formal investigation to determine the root cause of the adhesive curing time variation, including a review of process parameters, equipment calibration, and raw material lots. Implement corrective actions based on the findings and verify their effectiveness. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal investigation to determine the root cause of the adhesive curing time variation, including a review of process parameters, equipment calibration, and raw material lots. Implement corrective actions based on the findings and verify their effectiveness. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device manufacturing. ensuring consistent product quality when a critical production process is subject to variability. The challenge lies in balancing the need for efficient production with the absolute requirement for patient safety and product efficacy, as mandated by 21 CFR Part 820. The core issue is identifying and mitigating risks associated with process deviations that could impact device performance. The correct approach focuses on a systematic, data-driven investigation to understand the root cause of the variability and implement effective corrective and preventive actions. CAPA. This aligns directly with the principles of 21 CFR Part 820, particularly the requirements for production and process controls, Section 820. 70, and corrective and preventive action, Section 820. 100. By performing a thorough investigation, including process validation and statistical analysis, the manufacturer demonstrates a commitment to identifying the underlying issues and preventing recurrence. This proactive stance is essential for maintaining compliance and ensuring the safety and effectiveness of the medical device. An incorrect approach would be to dismiss the observed variability as insignificant without proper investigation. This fails to acknowledge the potential for even minor deviations to have a cumulative or critical impact on device performance, thereby violating the spirit and letter of 21 CFR Part 820. Another incorrect approach would be to implement a superficial fix, such as simply adjusting a parameter without understanding the root cause. This is a reactive measure that does not address the fundamental problem and is likely to lead to recurring issues, demonstrating a failure in the CAPA process. Finally, continuing production without any investigation or corrective action is a direct violation of the QSR, as it prioritizes production over product quality and patient safety, creating significant regulatory and ethical risks. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured problem-solving framework. This involves 1. Recognizing and documenting the deviation. 2. Initiating an investigation to determine the scope and potential impact. 3. Applying root cause analysis techniques to identify the underlying reasons for the deviation. 4. Developing and implementing effective CAPA. 5. Verifying the effectiveness of the CAPA. This systematic approach ensures that all potential risks are addressed and that the quality system remains robust. Question 10. During the evaluation of design outputs for a new medical device, what is the most critical factor to ensure compliance with 21 CFR Part 820, 30D, and facilitate effective manufacturing and verification? Option A. Design output specifications are supplemented by verbal agreements with the engineering team to clarify any ambiguities. Option B. The design history file is complete, containing all records related to the design and development process. Option C. The design outputs are documented with sufficient detail to ensure proper manufacturing and include clear and unambiguous instructions for verification. Option D. The design outputs are transferred to manufacturing as quickly as possible to meet project timelines. Correct answer is C. The design outputs are documented with sufficient detail to ensure proper manufacturing and include clear and unambiguous instructions for verification. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device design and development, ensuring that design outputs are sufficiently detailed and unambiguous to be used for manufacturing and verification. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for comprehensive documentation with the practicalities of iterative design. A design output that is too vague can lead to manufacturing errors, inconsistent product quality, and ultimately, patient risk. Conversely, an overly rigid or premature design output can stifle innovation and make it difficult to incorporate necessary design changes. The professional challenge is to identify when design outputs have reached a state of completeness and clarity that satisfies the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820, 70A, without being so prescriptive that it hinders the design process. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on verifying that the design outputs are documented in a format that is clear, complete, and unambiguous, enabling effective verification and validation activities. This aligns directly with the intent of 21 CFR Part 820, 30D, which mandates that design output shall be documented in a form that can be reviewed and approved. The emphasis on sufficient detail to ensure proper manufacturing and clear and unambiguous instructions for verification directly addresses the core purpose of design outputs as defined by the QSR. This approach ensures that the design is translated into tangible specifications that can be reliably manufactured and tested, minimizing the risk of errors and nonconformities. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach focuses solely on the completion of the design history file, DHF, without ensuring the adequacy of the design outputs themselves. While the DHF is crucial, its completeness does not automatically guarantee that the design outputs meet the necessary clarity and detail requirements for manufacturing and verification. This approach represents a procedural failure, overlooking the substantive quality of the design outputs. Another incorrect approach prioritizes the speed of design transfer over the thoroughness of design output documentation. This can lead to the transfer of incomplete or ambiguous specifications, increasing the likelihood of manufacturing issues and the need for costly rework or design changes later in the process. This approach demonstrates a failure to adhere to the principle of design output shall be documented in a form that can be reviewed and approved, as per 21 CFR Part 820. 30. D. As the outputs are not truly ready for review and approval if they are not sufficiently detailed. A third incorrect approach relies on verbal agreements or informal clarifications to supplement design outputs. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. 21 CFR Part 820. 30. D. Requires design outputs to be documented. Relying on informal communication bypasses the controlled documentation system, making it impossible to trace decisions, ensure consistency, and verify that all intended specifications have been met. This creates a high risk of misinterpretation and non-compliance. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach the evaluation of design outputs by first understanding the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. 30D. Regarding documentation, review, and approval. The key is to assess whether the documented outputs provide clear, complete, and unambiguous specifications that can be used by manufacturing personnel and for verification activities. This involves a critical review of the content and format of the design outputs, not just their presence in the DHF. Professionals should ask, can someone unfamiliar with the design process understand and execute these specifications correctly? They should also consider the potential impact of any ambiguities on product safety and effectiveness. If any doubt exists regarding clarity or completeness, further refinement of the design outputs is necessary before proceeding to manufacturing or verification. This systematic approach ensures regulatory compliance and fosters a culture of quality and risk management. Question 11. Strategic planning requires a robust framework for selecting and evaluating suppliers of critical components for medical devices. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820 for ensuring purchased product conforms to specified requirements? Option A. Establishing documented supplier evaluation and selection criteria that are directly linked to the intended use and risk classification of the medical device components and require objective evidence of supplier capability. Option B. Prioritizing suppliers based solely on the lowest bid to minimize manufacturing costs. Option C. Selecting suppliers based on long-standing relationships without periodic reevaluation of their current quality systems and capabilities. Option D. Relying exclusively on supplier self-declarations of compliance without independent verification of their quality systems. The correct answer is A. Establishing documented supplier evaluation and selection criteria that are directly linked to the intended use and risk classification of the medical device components and require objective evidence of supplier capability. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because selecting suppliers for critical components of medical devices involves balancing cost, quality, and regulatory compliance. A failure in supplier evaluation can directly impact the safety and effectiveness of the final medical device, leading to patient harm, product recalls, and significant financial and reputational damage. The challenge lies in establishing a robust, documented process that ensures suppliers consistently meet the stringent requirements of 21 CFR Part 820, the Quality System Regulation, QSR. This requires careful judgment to avoid compromising quality for cost savings or overlooking potential risks associated with a supplier's quality system. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes establishing documented supplier evaluation and selection criteria that are directly linked to the intended use and risk classification of the medical device components. This aligns with 21 CFR 820-50, which mandates that a manufacturer shall establish and maintain procedures to ensure that all purchased or otherwise received product and services conform to specified requirements. Specifically, 820-50A. 1. Requires the establishment of criteria for the evaluation, selection, and monitoring of suppliers. By defining criteria based on the criticality of the component, the supplier's quality system capabilities, e.g., ISO 13485 certification, past audit performance, and their ability to meet device specifications, the manufacturer proactively mitigates risks. This documented, risk-based approach ensures that suppliers are capable of consistently providing product that meets the manufacturer's quality standards and regulatory requirements, thereby safeguarding patient safety and device efficacy. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to prioritize suppliers solely based on the lowest bid. This fails to meet the requirements of 21 CFR 820-50 because it neglects to establish criteria related to quality and compliance. A low bid may indicate compromises in material quality, manufacturing processes, or quality control, all of which can lead to non-conforming product. This approach creates a significant regulatory risk, as the manufacturer cannot demonstrate that they have ensured purchased product conforms to specified requirements. Another incorrect approach is to rely exclusively on supplier self-declarations of compliance without independent verification. While supplier declarations can be a starting point, 21 CFR 820-50A. 1. Requires the manufacturer to establish criteria for evaluation, which implies a need for objective evidence. Relying solely on self-declarations bypasses the manufacturer's responsibility to verify supplier capabilities and can lead to the acceptance of substandard components. This is a failure to adequately assess and ensure supplier quality. A third incorrect approach is to select suppliers based on long-standing relationships without re-evaluating their current quality systems and capabilities. While historical performance can be a factor, 21 CFR 820-50A. 3. Requires that suppliers be monitored. Market conditions, technological advancements, and changes within the supplier's organization can impact their ability to consistently meet requirements. Failing to periodically re-evaluate suppliers, especially for critical components, means the manufacturer may not be aware of emerging risks or declining quality standards, thus failing to maintain an effective supplier control program. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach supplier evaluation and selection by first identifying the critical components and services required for their medical devices. For each, they must determine the associated risks and the impact on device safety and effectiveness. Based on this risk assessment, documented criteria should be developed. These criteria should encompass not only cost, but also the supplier's quality management system, technical capabilities, regulatory compliance history, and ability to meet specific product requirements. The selection process should involve objective evidence gathering, such as audits, review of quality certifications, and sample testing. Once selected, suppliers must be continuously monitored to ensure ongoing compliance and performance. This systematic, documented, and risk-based approach is essential for meeting the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820 and ensuring the integrity of medical devices. Question 12. Consider a scenario where a medical device manufacturer is developing a new software feature for an existing FDA-cleared device. The software team proposes a minor modification to an algorithm that they believe will improve efficiency, but does not anticipate any impact on the device's safety or intended use. The team is eager to release this improvement quickly to gain a competitive edge. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820 for managing this change? Option A. Update the device's software and associated documentation internally, but refrain from notifying the FDA or updating the Device Master Record, DMR, until a significant number of such minor updates have accumulated. Option B. Conduct a thorough risk assessment of the proposed algorithm modification, document the evaluation of its impact on safety and performance, and follow the established design change control procedures, including necessary verification and validation activities, before releasing the updated software. Option C. Release the software update immediately to the market, as the modification is considered minor and does not alter the device's primary function, with plans to document the change retrospectively if any issues arise. Option D. Implement the software modification after internal peer review and update the user manual to reflect the change, without initiating a formal design change control process. The correct answer is D. Implement the software modification after internal peer review and update the user manual to reflect the change, without initiating a formal design change control process. Explanation: Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device quality systems, balancing the need for robust documentation and process control with the practical realities of product development and market responsiveness. The challenge lies in interpreting the broad requirements of 21 CFR Part 820 and applying them to a specific, evolving product without compromising compliance or patient safety. The pressure to innovate and release new features quickly can create tension with the systematic approach mandated by the quality system regulation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that changes, even seemingly minor ones, are adequately controlled and documented according to the established quality system. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of 21 CFR Part 820, specifically focusing on the design controls, 21 CFR 820, 30, and document controls, 21 CFR 820, 40 sections. This approach recognizes that any modification to a device, regardless of its perceived impact, must be evaluated within the framework of the established quality system. This means assessing the change's potential impact on device performance, safety, and labeling, and then implementing appropriate design verification and validation activities. Documenting these evaluations and approvals, and updating relevant design history file, DHF, and device master record, DMR, components ensures traceability and compliance. This systematic process represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the regulatory requirement to maintain a controlled and documented quality system throughout the product lifecycle, thereby safeguarding product quality and patient safety. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves bypassing formal change control procedures for minor software updates, assuming they do not affect the device's safety or effectiveness. This is a regulatory failure because 21 CFR 820, 40 document controls mandates that changes to documents be reviewed and approved by authorized personnel. Furthermore, 21 CFR 820, 30 design controls requires that design changes be evaluated and that relevant documents be updated. Even minor changes can have unforeseen consequences on device performance or interactions with other systems, and failing to document and control them violates the core principles of the QSR. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on informal internal testing and peer review for software modifications without formal documentation or validation. This fails to meet the requirements for design verification and validation outlined in 21 CFR 820. 30. Verification ensures that the design output meets the design input requirements, and validation ensures that the device meets user needs and intended uses. Informal processes lack the rigor and documented evidence required by the FDA to demonstrate that these critical steps have been adequately performed. A third incorrect approach is to update the device's labeling and user manual without a corresponding formal change control process for the device's design or software. While labeling is part of the QSR, changes to it must be linked to the underlying design or manufacturing changes that necessitate the update. Updating labeling in isolation without a controlled process to ensure the accuracy of the information relative to the actual device functionality is a failure of document control and can lead to misinforming users, potentially impacting patient safety. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a proactive and systematic approach to change management. This involves establishing clear procedures for identifying, evaluating, approving, implementing, and verifying all changes to a medical device, including software. The decision-making process should prioritize patient safety and regulatory compliance. When faced with a change, the professional should ask: 1. What is the nature of the change? 2. What are the potential impacts on the device's safety, performance, and intended use? 3. Which sections of 21 CFR Part 820 are relevant to this change, e.g., design controls, document controls, production and process controls. 4. What documentation is required to support the evaluation and implementation of this change? 5. What verification and validation activities are necessary to confirm the change's effectiveness and lack of adverse impact? By following this structured reasoning, professionals can ensure that all changes are managed in a compliant and responsible manner, upholding the integrity of the quality system and the safety of the medical device. Question 13. The review process indicates that for a new infusion pump, the design verification activities focused exclusively on confirming that the pump's software met all specified functional requirements. But the design validation phase relied solely on internal engineering team simulations of patient use scenarios without direct user, clinician, or patient involvement or feedback. Which approach best ensures compliance with 21 CFR Part 820 for this device? Option A. Focus solely on updating the design inputs to better reflect the engineering team's understanding of intended use, as the current verification is robust. Option B. Supplement the internal simulations with additional laboratory-based performance testing that mimics clinical environments, but without direct user interaction. Option C. Rely on the comprehensive software verification as sufficient evidence of validation, as the simulations performed by the engineering team accurately reflected intended patient use. Option D. Conduct design validation that includes testing under actual or representative use conditions, with direct user involvement to confirm the device meets user needs and intended uses, in addition to the existing software verification. The correct answer is D. Conduct design validation that includes testing under actual or representative use conditions, with direct user involvement to confirm the device meets user needs and intended uses, in addition to the existing software verification. Explanation. The review process indicates a potential gap in the design verification and validation activities for a new Class Roman II medical device. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a thorough understanding of 21 CFR Part 820 requirements for ensuring a device is safe and effective for its intended use, and that it meets design specifications. The core of the challenge lies in distinguishing between verification, did we build the device right, and validation, did we build the right device? Misinterpreting or inadequately performing either can lead to significant regulatory noncompliance and patient risk. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the regulatory mandate of 21 CFR Part 820, 40, Design Validation, and 21 CFR Part 820, 30, G, Design Verification. Design validation must confirm that the device meets the user needs and intended uses, and this is typically achieved through clinical evaluations or other suitable means. Design verification must confirm that the design output meets the design input requirements. A comprehensive approach that includes both user feedback during validation and objective evidence for verification ensures that the device is not only built to specification, but also performs as intended in the real-world use environment. This aligns with the quality system regulations' overarching goal of ensuring device safety and effectiveness. An incorrect approach that relies solely on laboratory testing without user feedback during validation fails to meet the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. 40. Design validation must confirm that the device can be used as intended by the user. Laboratory testing alone may not adequately capture all aspects of real-world use, such as usability issues or environmental factors not simulated in a controlled lab setting. This constitutes a regulatory failure by not adequately validating the device against user needs and intended uses. Another incorrect approach that focuses only on design verification, without ensuring that the design inputs accurately reflect user needs and intended uses, is also a regulatory failure. Verification confirms that the design output meets the design input, but if the design inputs themselves are flawed or incomplete, the verification will not ensure the device's suitability for its intended purpose. This bypasses the critical step of ensuring the device is designed to meet the actual needs of the users and the intended application, as required by 21 CFR Part 820. 30A, Design and Development Planning, and 21 CFR Part 820. 30C, Design Input. A third incorrect approach that substitutes internal testing for external validation without a documented justification for why external validation is not necessary is a significant regulatory failure. 21 CFR Part 820(40) requires validation to be conducted under actual or representative use conditions. While internal testing can be part of verification, it may not be sufficient for validation unless it can be rigorously demonstrated to represent actual use conditions and capture all relevant user feedback and performance aspects. The lack of justification for this deviation from typical validation practices undermines the integrity of the validation process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the device's intended use and user needs. This informs the development of robust design inputs. Subsequently, a comprehensive verification plan should be established to confirm that the design outputs meet these inputs. Finally, a thorough validation plan, incorporating actual or representative use conditions and user feedback, must be executed to confirm that the device meets user needs and intended uses. Any deviation from these principles requires strong, documented justification based on risk assessment and regulatory requirements. Question 14. Which approach would be most effective in translating a company's quality policy and objectives into tangible improvements within a medical device manufacturing environment, ensuring compliance with 21 CFR Part 820? Option A. Establishing aspirational quality goals that are not directly tied to specific device performance metrics or regulatory compliance requirements. Option B. Simply reiterating the broad statements of the quality policy as the primary objectives for all employees. Option C. Assigning the sole responsibility for achieving quality objectives to the Quality Assurance Department, with minimal involvement from other functional areas. Option D. Developing specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, objectives that are cascaded to relevant departments, with clear metrics for tracking progress and regular management review. The correct answer is D. Developing specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, objectives that are cascaded to relevant departments, with clear metrics for tracking progress and regular management review. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device quality management, translating high-level quality policy and objectives into actionable, measurable goals that are effectively communicated and integrated into daily operations. The difficulty lies in ensuring that these objectives are not merely aspirational statements, but are concrete, achievable, and demonstrably contribute to the overall quality of the device and patient safety, as mandated by 21 CFR Part 820. The risk is that without a clear implementation strategy, the quality policy and objectives can become disconnected from the actual work performed by employees, leading to a superficial compliance rather than a robust quality system. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic process of defining specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, SMART, objectives that directly support the established quality policy. This includes identifying key performance indicators, KPI, that can be tracked and analyzed to assess progress. Crucially, it requires a clear communication plan to ensure all relevant personnel understand their role in achieving these objectives and how their work contributes to the overall quality goals. Furthermore, it necessitates establishing mechanisms for regular review and feedback, allowing for adjustments to objectives and strategies as needed. This aligns with 21 CFR 820(22) Quality System Review and the general intent of 21 CFR 820. 5. Quality system. To ensure that the quality system is effective and maintained. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves simply restating the quality policy as objectives without defining specific, measurable targets. This fails to provide a clear direction for improvement and makes it impossible to assess the effectiveness of the quality system. It is a superficial compliance that does not meet the spirit or intent of 21 CFR Part 820, which requires a system that ensures devices meet their intended use and are safe and effective. Another incorrect approach is to delegate the entire responsibility for achieving quality objectives to the quality unit without involving other departments. This creates a siloed approach and ignores the fact that quality is a company-wide responsibility. The QSR emphasizes that management is responsible for establishing and maintaining the quality system, and this includes ensuring that all personnel are aware of their responsibilities. Without cross-functional involvement, objectives are unlikely to be effectively integrated into all relevant processes. A third incorrect approach is to set objectives that are vague, aspirational, or not directly linked to device quality or patient safety. For example, setting an objective solely focused on reducing internal administrative costs without a clear connection to how this impacts device quality or compliance would be insufficient. The QSR's primary focus is on ensuring the safety and effectiveness of medical devices, and quality objectives must reflect this paramount concern. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach the implementation of quality policy and objectives by first ensuring a thorough understanding of the quality policy's intent and the regulatory requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. This involves a structured process of breaking down the policy into actionable, measurable objectives that are relevant to the specific medical device and its life cycle. The decision-making process should prioritize objectives that directly impact device safety, effectiveness, and compliance. Communication and training are critical to ensure buy-in and understanding across the organization. Regular monitoring, analysis, and review of progress against these objectives, with a feedback loop for continuous improvement, are essential for demonstrating an effective quality system. Question 15. The performance metrics show a gradual increase in the standard deviation for a critical process parameter over the past 3 months, although all individual measurements remain within the specified product tolerance limits. What is the most appropriate regulatory compliance action to take? Option A. Reevaluate the process validation documentation to confirm that the current operating parameters are still adequate. Option B. Document the observed trend as acceptable statistical variation and continue monitoring without further immediate action. Option C. Increase the sampling frequency of finished product testing to ensure any potential nonconformances are detected. Option D. Initiate a root cause investigation to identify the factors contributing to the increased process variability and implement targeted corrective actions. Correct answer is D. Initiate a root cause investigation to identify the factors contributing to the increased process variability and implement targeted corrective actions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device manufacturing, identifying and addressing process drift that could impact product quality and patient safety. The challenge lies in interpreting performance data, understanding the underlying process variability, and determining the appropriate corrective and preventive actions, CAPA, in accordance with 21 CFR Part 820. A failure to accurately assess and respond to this data can lead to non-conforming product reaching the market, regulatory non-compliance, and potential harm to patients. The professional challenge is to move beyond simply observing metrics to understanding their root causes and implementing effective controls. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation into the root cause of the observed increase in process variability. This aligns directly with the intent of 21 CFR Part 820, particularly sections related to process validation, 820, 75, and control of non-conforming product, 820, 90. By analyzing the data in conjunction with process parameters, environmental conditions, and personnel factors, the quality unit can identify the specific source of the drift. Implementing targeted corrective actions to address the identified root cause, followed by verification of effectiveness, ensures that the process is brought back into a state of control and that future occurrences are prevented. This proactive and data-driven approach is fundamental to maintaining product quality and regulatory compliance. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to dismiss the observed variability as within acceptable statistical limits without further investigation. This fails to acknowledge the potential for subtle shifts that, while not immediately causing outright nonconformance, could indicate a degradation of process control and an increased risk of future issues. This approach violates the principle of continuous improvement and proactive risk management inherent in the QSR. Another incorrect approach is to implement a broad, unverified change to the process without a thorough root cause analysis. This could involve adjusting multiple parameters simultaneously or implementing a generic solution that may not address the actual problem, potentially introducing new issues or failing to resolve the original one. This bypasses the systematic investigation required by the QSR for effective CAPA and can lead to wasted resources and continued risk. A third incorrect approach is to simply increase the frequency of finished product testing to catch any non-conforming units. While increased testing might detect some issues, it does not address the underlying process problem. This reactive measure is less effective and more costly than preventing the issue at the source, and it does not fulfill the QSR's requirement to control processes to ensure product quality. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first recognizing that any deviation from established process performance, even if seemingly minor, warrants investigation. The decision-making process should follow a structured COPPA framework. 1. Data review and trend analysis. Understand the nature and extent of the observed variability. 2. Root cause analysis. Employ systematic methods, e.g., fishbone diagrams, 5 whys, to identify the fundamental cause. 3. Corrective action development. Design actions that specifically address the identified root cause. 4. Implementation and verification. Execute the corrective actions and confirm their effectiveness through re-evaluation of process performance. 5. Preventive action consideration. Determine if similar issues could occur in other processes and implement broader preventive measures. This systematic approach ensures that actions are targeted, effective, and contribute to the overall quality system's robustness, aligning with the principles of 21 CFR Part 820. Question 16. The risk matrix shows a moderate risk associated with a recurring manufacturing defect. Following the implementation of a corrective action plan, the quality assurance team is tasked with verifying its effectiveness. Which of the following approaches best demonstrates compliance with 21 CFR Part 820 requirements for COPPA effectiveness verification? Option A. Relying on the fact that no new customer complaints related to this specific defect have been received since the corrective action was implemented. Option B. Conducting a single inspection of the next production batch to confirm the immediate absence of the defect, assuming the problem is resolved. Option C. Reviewing production records for a defined period to confirm the absence of the specific defect and conducting a follow-up audit of the manufacturing process to ensure adherence to the revised procedures. Option D. Accepting the corrective action as effective because all documented steps of the COPPA plan have been completed by the responsible personnel. The correct answer is C. Reviewing production records for a defined period to confirm the absence of the specific defect, and conducting a follow-up audit of the manufacturing process to ensure adherence to the revised procedures. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device quality systems, ensuring that corrective actions effectively address the root cause of a problem and prevent recurrence, as mandated by 21 CFR Part 820. The difficulty lies in moving beyond superficial fixes to robust verification that the COPPA has achieved its intended outcome. A stakeholder perspective, encompassing manufacturing, quality assurance, and potentially end users or regulatory affairs, is crucial for a comprehensive assessment of COPPA effectiveness. The correct approach emphasizes objective evidence that the implemented corrective action has eliminated the identified nonconformity and its root cause. This involves demonstrating, through documented testing, inspection, or other verification activities, that the device or process now functions as intended and that the original problem will not recur. This aligns directly with the intent of 21 CFR Part 820, 100A, 3, which requires verification of the effectiveness of the corrective and preventive action. Best professional practice dictates a proactive and evidence-based approach to COPPA effectiveness verification, ensuring patient safety and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the absence of customer complaints after the COPPA implementation fails to meet the regulatory requirement for verification. Customer complaints are a reactive measure and do not provide objective evidence that the root cause has been addressed or that the problem is truly eliminated. This approach risks overlooking underlying systemic issues. Another incorrect approach, which assumes effectiveness based on the completion of the corrective action steps without objective verification, ignores the critical requirement to prove the action's success. This is a failure to demonstrate due diligence and compliance with the QSR. A third incorrect approach, which focuses only on the immediate fix without considering potential long-term impacts or recurrence, is also insufficient. Effectiveness verification must consider the sustained impact of the COPPA, Professionals should approach CAPA effectiveness verification by first clearly defining the criteria for success, based on the identified root cause and the intended outcome of the corrective action. This should involve establishing objective, measurable criteria before the CAPA is closed. Then, they must design and execute verification activities that provide objective evidence against these criteria. This process should involve cross-functional teams to ensure a comprehensive review and consideration of all relevant aspects. If the verification activities do not demonstrate effectiveness, the CAPA should be reopened and further investigation and action taken. Question 17. The investigation demonstrates a recurring nonconformance in the assembly of a Class Roman II medical device. Previous corrective actions have focused on retraining the specific operators involved in the most recent instances of the issue. However, the nonconformance continues to appear intermittently. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820 for investigating and resolving such a recurring problem? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive review of all historical nonconformance data for this device, analyze manufacturing process parameters, review design documentation for potential weaknesses, and employ a structured problem-solving methodology to identify systemic root causes, followed by verification of corrective action effectiveness. Option B. Issue a new training bulletin to all assembly personnel reiterating the importance of following the current work instructions. Option C. Document the nonconformance as an acceptable level of risk based on the low frequency of occurrence and continue with routine monitoring. Option D. Implement a more stringent inspection at the final product stage to catch all instances of the nonconformance before release. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive review of all historical nonconformance data for this device, analyze manufacturing process parameters, review design documentation for potential weaknesses, and employ a structured problem-solving methodology to identify systemic root causes, followed by verification of corrective action effectiveness. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device quality systems, a recurring nonconformance that has evaded effective root cause identification. The difficulty lies in moving beyond superficial fixes to uncover the underlying systemic issues that permit the problem to persist. Professionals must balance the urgency of addressing the immediate nonconformance with the need for a thorough, data-driven investigation that prevents recurrence. The challenge is amplified by the potential impact on patient safety and regulatory compliance if the root cause is not accurately identified and mitigated. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic and comprehensive investigation that goes beyond the immediate symptoms. It requires leveraging multiple data sources, including historical complaint data, manufacturing records, design history files, and user feedback, to identify patterns and contributing factors. Employing structured problem-solving methodologies, such as failure mode and effects analysis, FME, or Ishikawa fishbone diagrams, helps to systematically explore potential causes. The focus on verifying the effectiveness of implemented corrective actions through retesting, audits, or ongoing monitoring is crucial for ensuring the root cause has been addressed and the nonconformance will not recur. This aligns with 21 CFR 820, 100 corrective and preventive action, which mandates that CAPA be investigated to identify the root cause and that the effectiveness of the CAPA be verified. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing a corrective action without a thorough root cause analysis is a significant regulatory failure. This approach, often driven by a desire for quick resolution, violates 21 CFR 820, 100 by failing to identify the true root cause. The risk is that the implemented action only addresses a symptom, leading to the recurrence of the nonconformance and potential patient harm. Focusing solely on the most recent occurrence of the nonconformance, without considering historical data or trends, represents a failure to conduct a comprehensive investigation as required by 21 CFR 820, 100. This can lead to an incomplete understanding of the problem and the selection of an ineffective corrective action. The regulatory expectation is to understand the systemic nature of a problem, not just isolated incidents. Attributing the nonconformance to operator error without objective evidence or a systematic analysis of contributing factors is a common but often incorrect shortcut. While human error can be a factor, 21 CFR 820. 100 requires investigating the underlying reasons for that error, such as inadequate training, unclear procedures, or environmental factors. Simply blaming an individual without this deeper analysis is a failure to identify the true root cause and implement effective preventive actions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach nonconformance investigations with a mindset of continuous improvement and patient safety. The decision-making process should prioritize a data-driven, systematic approach. When faced with a recurring nonconformance, the first step is to gather all relevant data. Then, select an appropriate problem-solving tool to brainstorm and analyze potential root causes. Critically evaluate each potential cause based on the evidence. Once a root cause is identified, develop a corrective action that directly addresses it. Finally, establish a robust verification plan to confirm the effectiveness of the corrective action before closing the CAPA. This structured approach ensures compliance with 21 CFR 820. 100 and promotes the long-term quality and safety of medical devices. Question 18. Market research demonstrates a significant increase in customer complaints related to a specific feature of a medical device, alongside a rise in reported adverse events for the same feature. The company's upcoming scheduled management review is approaching. Which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with 21 CFR Part 820 and promotes effective quality system management? Option A. Focus the management review primarily on the positive outcomes of recent product development initiatives and the successful completion of internal audits from the previous quarter, as these demonstrate overall system health. Option B. Limit the management review to a high-level overview of the QMS, primarily confirming that all required documentation for the period is in place and signed off by management. Option C. Prioritize the review of data related to cost-saving measures and operational efficiencies implemented in the last fiscal year, as these are key indicators of business performance and management strategic direction. Option D. Conduct the management review by discussing the latest market research findings and customer complaint data, alongside adverse event reports, to evaluate the suitability and effectiveness of the quality management system and identify necessary improvements. The correct answer is A. Focus the management review primarily on the positive outcomes of recent product development initiatives and the successful completion of internal audits from the previous quarter, as these demonstrate overall system health. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a medical device manufacturer to balance the need for continuous improvement and responsiveness to market feedback with the stringent requirements of 21 CFR Part 820 for maintaining a robust quality management system, QMS. The core of the challenge lies in ensuring that management review, a critical component of the QMS, is not merely a perfunctory exercise, but a dynamic process that actively drives improvements based on real-world data. The effectiveness of management review is directly tied to its ability to identify trends, assess the suitability and effectiveness of the QMS, and initiate necessary corrective and preventive actions. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with the intent and requirements of 21 CFR Part 820, specifically Section 820. 20E Management Review. This approach ensures that management review is conducted at planned intervals and that the inputs considered are comprehensive, including data from audits, process performance, product quality, customer feedback, and regulatory compliance. By actively using this data to evaluate the QMS and identify opportunities for improvement, the company demonstrates a commitment to product safety and effectiveness, which is the overarching goal of the QSR. This proactive stance fosters a culture of quality and continuous improvement, essential for long-term success and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reviewing past audit findings without considering current market feedback or product performance data fails to meet the comprehensive input requirements of Section 820. 20E. This omission represents a regulatory failure because it limits the scope of the review, potentially overlooking emerging issues that could impact product safety or effectiveness. Ethically, it suggests a lack of diligence in safeguarding patient well-being. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes reviewing only positive feedback and success metrics, while neglecting adverse event reports or customer complaints, constitutes a significant regulatory and ethical failure. The selective review violates the spirit of Section 820. 20E. by not considering all relevant information, including data that indicates potential problems. Such an approach can lead to a false sense of security and prevent the identification and mitigation of risks, directly jeopardizing patient safety and violating the manufacturer's ethical obligation to provide safe and effective devices. Third incorrect approach that treats management review as a documentation exercise, where the focus is on completing the required minutes rather than on substantive discussion and decision-making, is also a regulatory failure. While documentation is necessary, the QSR emphasizes the effectiveness of the QMS. If the review does not lead to actionable insights and improvements, it is not fulfilling its purpose under Section 820(e). This can be seen as an ethical lapse if it leads to a superficial commitment to quality. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the regulatory requirements, particularly the inputs and outputs expected for management review as outlined in 21 CFR Part 820. Professionals should adopt a risk-based approach, prioritizing the review of data that has the greatest potential impact on product safety and effectiveness. This includes actively seeking out and analyzing all relevant data, even if it is unfavorable. Furthermore, fostering an environment where open and honest discussion is encouraged during management review is crucial. The output of the review should always include clear action items, assigned responsibilities, and timelines for implementation, with a mechanism for follow-up to ensure completion and effectiveness. Question 19. Performance analysis shows a consistent trend of minor deviations in a critical manufacturing process for a Class Roman II medical device, leading to increased rework and a slight but noticeable dip in overall production efficiency. The quality unit is considering several approaches to address this trend. Which approach best aligns with the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820 for maintaining an effective quality management system? Option A. Implement a comprehensive CAPA investigation to identify the root cause of the deviations, develop and validate corrective actions, and update relevant procedures and training, followed by post-implementation monitoring. Option B. Expedite the implementation of a new, unvalidated automated system to replace the current process, with the expectation that it will inherently resolve the deviations and improve efficiency. Option C. Focus on retraining operators on existing procedures without a formal investigation into the root cause of the deviations, assuming the issue is solely human error. Option D. Authorize the production supervisor to make immediate, undocumented adjustments to process parameters based on their experience to quickly resolve the deviations and improve efficiency. The correct answer is A. Implement a comprehensive CAPA investigation to identify the root cause of the deviations, develop and validate corrective actions, and update relevant procedures and training, followed by post-implementation monitoring. Explanation. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge within a quality management system, QMS, as defined by 21 CFR Part 820. The core difficulty lies in balancing the need for robust process control and documentation with the practical realities of a dynamic manufacturing environment. A QMS must be effective in ensuring device safety and effectiveness, but it also needs to be adaptable enough to facilitate continuous improvement and efficient operations. The challenge is to identify and implement changes that enhance the QMS without introducing new risks or compromising compliance. The correct approach focuses on a systematic, data-driven, and risk-based methodology for QMS improvement. It prioritizes understanding the root cause of deviations and implementing corrective and preventive actions, CAPA, that are proportionate to the identified risks. This aligns directly with the principles of 21 CFR Part 820, particularly the emphasis on establishing and maintaining procedures for CAPA, 21 CFR 820, 100, and management review, 21 CFR 820. Which are critical for evaluating the effectiveness of the QMS and identifying areas for improvement. By involving cross-functional teams and validating changes, this approach ensures that improvements are well conceived, implemented effectively, and do not inadvertently create new compliance issues. This represents best professional practice because it is proactive, evidence-based, and directly supports the overarching goal of the QSR, ensuring the quality and safety of medical devices. An incorrect approach that bypasses formal change control procedures and relies solely on anecdotal evidence or the immediate judgment of a single department head is fundamentally flawed. This failure stems from a lack of systematic risk assessment and validation, which are cornerstones of the QSR. Such an approach risks introducing undocumented changes that could compromise device quality or lead to noncompliance with 21 CFR Part 820. For instance, bypassing the COPPA process, 21 CFR 820. 100 means that the root cause of the performance issue may not be fully understood or addressed, and the effectiveness of the implemented solution is not formally verified. Similarly, ignoring the need for management review, 21 CFR 820. 20 prevents a holistic assessment of the QMS's performance and the impact of changes. Another incorrect approach that focuses on superficial fixes without investigating underlying systemic issues fails to address the root causes of performance degradation. This is a violation of the spirit and letter of 21 CFR 820. 100, which mandates the investigation of nonconformities and the implementation of corrective actions to prevent recurrence. Relying on quick fixes can lead to recurring problems, increased costs, and ultimately, a compromised QMS. A third incorrect approach that prioritizes speed and cost reduction over thorough validation and documentation creates significant regulatory risk. While efficiency is desirable, it cannot come at the expense of compliance and product quality. The QSR requires documented evidence that processes are controlled and effective. Failing to adequately document and validate changes, even if they appear to improve performance, leaves the company vulnerable during regulatory inspections and can lead to serious compliance issues. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the performance issue and gather objective data. 2. Initiate a formal investigation, potentially through the COPPA system, to determine the root cause. 3. Assess the risks associated with the performance issue and any proposed solutions. 4. Develop and document proposed solutions, considering their impact on the entire QMS. 5. Implement changes through a controlled process, including appropriate validation and verification. 6. Document all activities and outcomes thoroughly. 7. Review the effectiveness of implemented changes through management review and ongoing performance monitoring. Question 20. Process analysis reveals that a critical step in the manufacturing of a Class Roman II medical device, as detailed in the Approved Device Master Record, DMR, and the Associated Device History Record, DHR template, was performed using a slightly modified parameter than what was explicitly documented. The operator, citing a perceived efficiency gain, made this adjustment without prior authorization or documented process change. What is the most appropriate regulatory compliant action to take regarding the devices produced under this modified process? Option A. Conduct a thorough investigation to determine the root cause of the deviation, assess its impact on the safety and effectiveness of the affected devices, and implement appropriate corrective and preventive actions based on the findings. Option B. Document the deviation in the DHR for the affected batch and proceed with the production of the next batch, assuming the operator's perceived efficiency gain indicates a minor, inconsequential change. Option C. Proceed with releasing the affected devices to the market after the operator provides a written statement confirming the perceived efficiency gain did not alter the device's functionality. Option D. Immediately quarantine all devices produced under the modified process and initiate a full recall without further investigation, assuming the deviation inherently compromises product quality. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough investigation to determine the root cause of the deviation, assess its impact on the safety and effectiveness of the affected devices, and implement appropriate corrective and preventive actions based on the findings. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in medical device manufacturing where a deviation from a documented production process is identified. The core difficulty lies in determining the appropriate response when a process, as defined in the Device History Record, DHR, and associated production documentation, is not strictly followed. This requires a thorough understanding of the Quality System Regulation, QSR, specifically 21 CFR Part 820, to ensure patient safety and product quality are not compromised. The challenge is amplified by the need to balance efficient production with regulatory compliance, avoiding unnecessary delays while thoroughly investigating and addressing the root cause of the deviation. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive investigation into the deviation. This aligns directly with the requirements of 21 CFR Part 820. 75. Process validation, which mandates that processes such as manufacturing, processing, packaging, and labeling must be validated with a high degree of assurance and confidence that they can produce a medical device conforming to specifications and quality attributes. When a deviation occurs, it calls into question the validity of the process as executed. Therefore, a thorough investigation, including root cause analysis, is essential to determine if the deviation impacts the device's safety or effectiveness. If the investigation reveals that the deviation did not impact the device's quality, the documentation should reflect this finding, and appropriate corrective and preventive actions, CAPA, should be implemented to prevent recurrence. This approach ensures that the QSR is upheld by addressing nonconformances systematically and verifying that the product meets its intended use and specifications. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply document the deviation in the DHR and proceed with the next batch without further investigation. This fails to address the potential impact of the deviation on the quality of the affected devices, violating the spirit and letter of 21 CFR Part 820. 100. Corrective and preventive action, which requires the investigation and correction of nonconformances. Another incorrect approach is to immediately quarantine all devices produced under the nonconforming process without a risk assessment. While quarantine is a tool for managing nonconforming product, it should be based on a documented risk assessment of the deviation's impact, not an automatic, unanalyzed response. This can lead to unnecessary disruption and cost. Finally, assuming the deviation had no impact without documented evidence or investigation is a critical failure. The QSR requires objective evidence to support such conclusions, as outlined in various sections, including 21 CFR Part 820, 198, Complaint Files, and 21 CFR Part 820. 70. Production and Process Controls. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation must adopt a systematic, risk-based approach. First, immediately assess the potential impact of the deviation on device safety and effectiveness. Second, initiate a formal investigation to determine the root cause of the deviation. Third, document all findings, including the root cause analysis and the determination of whether the deviation impacted device quality. Fourth, implement appropriate CAPA to prevent recurrence. This structured decision-making process ensures compliance with 21 CFR Part 820, protects patient safety, and maintains product integrity.